Hey, what is up guys? Let's build up quickly into our last video. So I mentioned a lot of the rules, things like that, but I did miss some stuff as far as chess rules, so let's just get into it. So as far as pawns, pawns have the ability to move one square or two squares from their initial starting point, but once a pawn moves two squares, or even one square, it can no longer move two squares. So as soon as this pawn from e2 moved to e4, it's not able to jump two squares again. So in this case, black also has the same mobility for his pawn, so he has an option of either moving his pawn one square or two square if he wanted to. But once you move a pawn two squares, you're not able to move it twice again. And also there is a weird en passant rule, which I completely forgot to mention. So en passant, the way it works, well, visually, let me show you how en passant works. So let's say black played e6, we played d5. So if a pawn skips this pawn and it has to move two squares, such as maybe f5, then this pawn can actually take that pawn. And you're like, wait a minute, how? Well, e takes f6, just diagonally. Why were we able to take this pawn in this fashion? Well, it's a rule. It's a chess rule that exists. If a pawn captures, let's go back. If a pawn moves in front of your pawn, which is right next to it, two squares, you're actually able to take it. So the rule is en passant. It can also happen to this pawn if it moved two squares. So if a black pawn goes to d5, this pawn can take that pawn. At this moment only. Like, you can take this pawn right now. You only have one chance. I mean, right when that move occurs. For example, if you made a different move, like pawn to d5, and then your opponent plays knight h6, can you do this any longer? No. You only have that one instant opportunity to take the pawn. So, as you can see, it's not letting me take the pawn. So, yeah, I think that's pretty much everything as far as rules and things like that. We pretty much highlighted all the basics, but let's get into some of the advanced, principles and whatnot. So let's just open up. I'm actually going to teach you an opening. Let's go over the Royal Opus. I mean, it's one of the most played openings of all time. I don't really play it. I'm not an e4 player, but a lot of people like to play the Royal Opus. So e4, usually Royal Opus is only possible if black plays e5. Anything else is a different opening. For example, c5 is the Sicilian opening. So e5, knight f3, and black has to play knight c6. Otherwise, if they play knight f6, this is the Petrov or something. Petrov defense, so knight c6. Bishop b5 is the Royal Opus. So why do we study openings? What's the purpose? Like, why even talk about openings? Well, once you guys get more and more competitive, like going into tournaments, things like that, you want to have some level of memorization going into those tournaments, because everyone is prepared. Everyone knows there's some amount of moves, theories, especially openings. So if you don't know anything going into tournaments, chances are you'll just make bad moves, and your opponent can pretty much, even if they're still following the general opening knowledge for that opening, I mean, they will get better and better positions, and you'll just find out that your position is just getting worse and worse. So that's why you study openings. It's to help you kind of play the game in a controlled manner, so to speak. So bishop b5. Now we're attacking the knight. The point of this move is to, well, the knight is defending e5 and white's pressuring e5. So we're kind of trying to take the knight, and if black takes our bishop, we're gonna take this pawn. But it turns out, I mean, black we're not really threatening to win this pawn. Let me show you why. Bishop takes knight, d takes, and if you take the knight, how can black put an attacker on both of these pieces at the same time? Well, queen d4. It attacks the knight, it attacks the pawn. So we're not really trying to win the pawn right away. The main line is bishop a5. The bishop usually doesn't trade itself for the knight, so let's just continue the game in this fashion. So let's say knight f6. I don't really know all the theory, but let's just make developing moves. And this is, the point of this is to teach you how you should approach a game, provided you know 2 or 3 opening moves, or maybe even 4 or 5, and you're kind of like, okay, now what? I've memorized 3-4 moves, but now what? Okay, let me show you. So black's attacking your pawn, simply defend. You didn't have to defend. If you were more clever, you can simply castle too. This is also fine. And if they take your pawn, I don't really know exactly the moves, but d5 it looks like a move. I just had to turn on the engine. Rook e1 is fine. I mean, d5, you kind of have to know. d5 is not a great move. So you kind of have to know what are, I mean, the most standard moves. Even black. If black doesn't play c5, his position just gets worse and worse. But let's keep it more simple. So instead of castling, you just defend the pawn. And if black decides to, usually they play b5. I mean, now that you've protected e4, what is black, or what is white's threatening? So white's actually ready to take the knight and this pawn, since e4 is well protected now. So usually black plays b5. Let's keep it very simple. Attacks the bishop. Can the bishop take the pawn? No, because the pawn is defended by another pawn. And we mentioned pawns captured diagonally. So what do? Or what you should do is just bring the bishop back. Don't continue to finish your development, such as castling, bring the knight out. Don't do this, because for the moment, your worry should be this bishop is attacked. You have to save your pieces, especially in the opening. You don't want to just lose pieces for no reason. Bishop b3. So let's say the bishop gets out. I've played this from black side many years ago, so if some of the strong players are thinking that these are not the main line moves, I mean, that's fine. This is how I played it. I think I brought the bishop. Sometimes I would fianchetto this bishop on b7 first before bringing out this bishop. So I'm not an e4 player. Or even as black, I don't reply with e5. Usually nowadays I play c5, the Sicilian, against e4. So, but let's keep it simple. So black's developing their bishop. Let's go ahead and castle. So white castles, and this is what you should do. I mean, there are other moves to consider, like c3 is a nice move. But for now, let's keep it a little bit more simple. Because what's the idea of c3? Well, control d4, and sometimes this knight on c6 wants to go to a5 to take the bishop. So that's the idea of c3. So if we castle, we're okay with trading. Maybe you've studied this opening. That's why you study opening. Maybe you have some idea to exploit the a file or something like that. So let's just continue. Let's say black doesn't play knight a5. A good developing move would be what? Well, bishop b7 we have to consider. So the standard moves. A lot of people talk about standard moves. So right now, if you're playing black, in your head you should be thinking, well, I moved my bishop once, I don't want to move it again, since it's already in a good square. So Thinking about this bishop shouldn't even be in your head, honestly, and at this moment of time, or in this position. In your head, you should be thinking, is my central pawn defended? Yes, white's not ready to take the pawn. So your pieces are defended. Am I ready to castle, or should I develop my bishop? So honestly, these two should be the only options in your head. Aside from, okay, all of my pieces are defended and my opponent isn't really trying to take anything. Okay, they are, but should you be worried about this bishop trying to capture f7? Not really, because even if you, let's say you win with this developing moves, bishop b7, if white takes on f7, is that a good move or a bad move? It looks like we're attacking the king with the bishop because the bishop is eyeing the king, so it's a check. But it turns out it's a terrible move because we only want a pawn for a whole bishop. And you're like, okay, I have following checks. I mean, knight g5, but the king just steps out somewhere, and now you just lost a piece. The attack is not there, you know? In this case, yeah, you can't even play f4 because this bishop is actually pinning the pawn to your king. So if you were trying to open this rook against the king, you can't even do that because this bishop is nicely placed to pin this pawn against your king. So this type of pin is an absolute pin, by the way. I don't think we covered these in my beginner's video. I don't think we highlighted a lot of the pins, so we'll get into that. So taking on f7 is bad in this case. So what should white do? Let's say one of you is like playing white. Should we worry about this idea, the knight going to a5, trying to win our bishop? I mean, yes and no. So if you really want to keep more pieces on the board, then yeah, create room. Play c3, and if black ever plays knight f5, tuck the bishop on c2. If you want to keep more pieces on the board, fine, you can do that. But for now, again, let's keep it more simple. We should be thinking about the knight and the bishop. Because this knight on f3 and the bishop on b3, they're already developed. Don't touch them. Because if you touch them, there is another thing in chess. Time. So if I touch this knight, let's say I'm going to go forward, I'm going to attack f7, well, you have a point. You're trying to win f7, now you have two attackers on f7. It's probably not terrible. Might even be okay. It turns out knight g5, it looks tempting to play this move because you have two attackers. It's not the best move. I mean, the computer's evaluation went from like white had an advantage, but now white pretty much lost all their advantage just by playing this move. Just because you moved the knight for a second time in a row, the computer thinks, I mean, that was not a good move because black can simply castle, and now what? Right? Now the rook and the king is defending f7. Another general principle, which applies pretty much 99% of the time, you should never give up two pieces for a rook and pawn, especially in the opening. Especially in all these e4, e5 openings, because losing your knight and your bishop for a rook and pawn, why is it bad? Because you gave up two pieces for a rook. Even though it's an equal amount of material that's being traded, a rook and a pawn is 6 points, a bishop and a knight is also 6 points. So it looks like the mat is equal, but it turns out having two pieces, even two knights, is better than the rook in a lot of positions. So a knight, a bishop, Two bishops is even better. Having the bishop pair against the rook, especially in endgames, I mean, you just have that extra piece that's gonna help you win the game, so to speak. So don't do this. General principle. Yeah, I'm sure we haven't highlighted this. So let's focus, let's rewind. These two. Which one should I move first? In this case, let's again stick to the general principle which I've mentioned in my last video. Move the knight first before the bishop. Why? Because the bishop has a lot of scope or mobility. So bishop has a lot of them. In this case, it can't really move to f4, but the knight, we kind of know it wants to go in the center. Sometimes you see some games where this knight actually blocks the path of the bishop, like knight d2. In this case, it's not really that great, because now this knight doesn't really have a square to move to. Every square is either occupied or attacked by black. I know an e4, e5 opening, there is this maneuvering thing that, yeah, I might as well include this. So usually this knight likes to go to d2, the rook moves over, the knight goes to f1, and the knight goes to g3. That's the idea of this e4, Roy Lopez, sometimes the Spanish Roy Lopez, I think, is the same thing. Or Italian opening where the bishop goes to c4, not b5 in the opening. Remember how we put the bishop from f1 to b5? So if you, in the opening, if you put the bishop on c4, that's a different opening. It's called the Italian. So I know for a fact this maneuvering of the knight exists. Why even bother making, how many moves is that? 1, 2, 3. Well, the knight on g1 is trying to get close to the king. Sometimes it wants to go to f5 or h5 to create some kind of attack around the black king. That's the purpose of this maneuvering. In this case, I don't really recommend it, especially for those who are just starting. But if we quickly look at it, this move is actually not terrible. Knight d2. It turns out it's one of the moves. And if black castles, we can play rook e1. If there is knight g4, rook e2, and then we kick out the knight, we continue with our plan. So it turns out this is fine. Yeah, I've seen games like this. I think Anand, yeah, there are games that, high-level games, where I've seen people go into these positions. It gets more and more complicated. You kind of have to figure out what to do next. So to keep it simple, take the bishop out, or wait, take the knight out toward the center and then take the bishop out this way. So just to keep it simple, knight c3, and if black castles, what should white do? So black is pretty much fully developed, except this queen. We'll get into that. But what should we do with this bishop on c1? What's a good square? Right now, we can't really put the bishop on f4, because, of course, that's attacked. So we have three options. Can we put the bishop on all the way up on h6? No. Why? Remember, pawns capture diagonally. So two of these squares is not possible. So which one of these three squares is good? For starters, bishop to e3 looks fine, but I don't recommend going into this double pawns. I mean, double pawns in the middle of the board, like on the D and E file, they're actually not terrible. In this case, they have their advantage. Well, the downside is your pawns are doubled. The upside is, well, that pawn that we just doubled, it's controlling d4. So that's already a plus. And it's controlling f4. But sometimes black can hop over and attack it. If the queen somehow ends up putting pressure on e3, it kind of gets annoying. But in this case, since the bishops are traded, it's not really like a big deal, so to speak. In this case, it's fine. Yeah, checking with the computer is fine. It's actually saying white's better. So, but to keep it simple, put the bishop on g5. And why not bishop d2? Well, you can put the bishop on d2. It's just not as active as putting the bishop on g5. On d2, it's kind of playing the role of defense. So you're pretty much like telling black, okay, like I'm just gonna play the game slowly. But I recommend whenever your opponent allows this type of pin, the knight against the queen, you should do it. You can also have this occur on some openings. I mean, we couldn't really pin the knight and the Royal Lopez because there was a pawn, but sometimes you can also put the bishop on b5 and pin the knight against the king. So that type of pin would be called an absolute pin. What does that mean? Well, the knight can move at that moment because the king is right behind it. This is a relative pin because the knight can actually move, but the thing is you will lose a higher value piece behind it. So in this case, the queen. Let's say black played h6 in this position. What should white do? Should we capture the knight or bring the bishop back? But you might say, which way? Should I put the bishop on h4 or d2 or even e3 or all the way back? Let's outrule all the way back because it doesn't make sense. Putting the bishop all the way to c1, it's not great because you're hindering your development. So don't put the bishop all the way back. There's no reason to do that. I would say continue continue the spin. And if black plays g5, tries to get rid of the spin, just back up. Don't try to be very creative by sacrificing things like that. It doesn't work. This sacrifice, it has to be bad. In this case, I'm wrong. It's actually okay to sacrifice. You get 2 pawns for 2 pieces. As you can see, I mean, the whole point I was trying to come across is you actually want to provoke black into pushing his kingside pawns. Why? Because it makes his king weaker. The more pawns he pushes in front of his king, it just creates all these weaknesses. So in this case, it turned out even sacrificing a knight for these 2 pawns is okay. Why? Because you have compensation. So sometimes it's okay to open up the king if you can. Yeah, even if you lose a bishop or a knight, it's okay to like open this king, because if you can get at least a couple other pieces around this bishop, the king is not going to be happy. If you can somehow bring the queen, or sometimes the rook comes over like this, then this king is going to be, it's pretty much unsafe and it's ready to be attacked. So usually black doesn't play g5 because they know it's going to weaken their kingside pawns. A lot of times black tries to de-pin themselves or get rid of the pin. Yeah, now the knight is free to move because we're not losing our queen. So, but this kind of goes defensive, which is okay. I mean, it's not terrible. Another way to play this is maybe queen e7 or something. Bishop e7 is the best move. What about queen e7? Okay, queen e7 is terrible. In this position, queen e7 is bad because now we're attacking the knight. This is also very typical. And a lot of Italian, Spanish, or Roy Lopez openings, your opponent will let you do this. So just be ready to do this on your opponent. You pin their knight against their queen, and your knight can actually move forward like this. Because what happens if this knight takes your knight? Remember, don't react to the trade that's happened. Look at all your other pieces. In this case, the bishop can actually take the queen. So you lost a couple of pieces for the queen. That's a good trade. And why is this so bad? Well, you might say, what if we just move the queen? Well, this is terrible again. I mean, without any calculation, the queen cannot take the knight. If the g-pawn takes, I mean, now the king is not safe again. So this is already bad for black. It's bad news. The king is not safe, and it's probably gonna get attacked, and white's gonna have an easy way to win. So it only takes a couple of bad moves to, in this case it only took one move to like pretty much get into a losing position. So you want to be very careful. Bishop e7 is like the best move to get rid of the spin. So to fully finish your development, it's been like what, 10 moves? So white made about 10 moves. So you want the rooks to be connected. That's another general principle. So before you sort of lash out on your opponent and like checkmate the king or create something, you want to make sure you have enough fuel. So this rook on a1 is not really doing much, and right now the queen is like blocking the rook's path. So sometimes you want to like move the queen up before you kind of like open things up, especially in the middle of the board. Like if I move my queen to e2, bring this rook over, and then play d4, you see how that's more powerful? You kind of have a little bit more fuel. So, but if you play d4 without this rook being in the middle of the board, the amount of action will be less and less. So it's important to utilize all your pieces to your advantage. So queen e2, I would think it's a good move. Queen e2, I mean, yeah, it's not terrible, but it's an okayish move. In this case, I mean, the computer is saying black, but whoever you're playing is not the engine. So play like a human, and your opponents will always react like a human. They're not engines to find like all these engine-looking moves. So connect your rooks, bring them to the center. In this case, which file is like tempting to open, or tempting for white to open? The d file, right? I mean, you can try to open the a file like via a4, a takes b5, but black may not even allow you to do that. If you play, like, let's just say black play d6, you play a4, I mean, black is not even gonna allow you to play a takes b5. Even if you open, he can play b4. Even if you open the a file, well, there's not much. The rooks will be traded, the queen can grab your rook, there's not much. But it's very tempting to open the d file for white. Why? Because the queen is still on d8. If you bring the rook over, let's say black played d6. In this case, let's bring this rook over. You want to play, if white manages to play d4, I mean, he's doing well. In this case, I mean, the computer is being kind of crazy. It's saying black is still better. But if white's able to, let's make like a normal looking human move. I mean, black is kind of stuck. That's why, like, the computer is saying these moves. Knight a5, take the bishop. Knight h7, trade these bishops, something like that. But if white's able to open, like, the d file, there will be some pressure against, like, black's position. So that's the key idea that you should get from this setup. You always want to have your rooks connected. I mean, white's fully developed. It's been about 11 moves. Yeah, after 11 moves, queen e2, white's fully developed. Now, the whole point is to bring the rooks, connect them, just like so, and then kind of bring them toward the center, and yeah, play the position that way. But yeah, I hope you guys learned some new ideas about chess as far as what was covered in this video. I think I went a little bit more into detail as far as how you should utilize your rook, especially. We went over the en passant rule, which was kind of insane. I mean, I'm sure there was a reason for that move, or it just made chess more complicated because humans love to be more complicated. But yeah, I think once you guys, I mean, this position is still the opening. So for now, let's focus on the opening, the pins, things like that. And in my next episode, we will kind of cover like middle game ideas and how you should like think about the position, how you should sort of react, how you should trade, things like that. Like if a pawn trade or a piece trade is offered, what you should do. So I hope you guys got something out of it, and take care.